The day began like any other. I was brewing my morning coffee, a ritual I couldn't shake, when a jarring screech of metal against concrete tore through the quiet. It was followed by a car horn so loud and shrill it made my dog, Buddy, yelp and dart under the table. My pulse quickened as I hurried to the door, already steeling myself for the worst. And there she was, Linda Grayson, her SUV half-lodged on my front lawn, the bumper inches from my carefully tended flower bed. She stood outside, arms folded tightly across her chest, her face contorted with indignation as if I'd personally insulted her lineage. "What the hell is this?" she bellowed, jabbing a finger at the low wooden fence I'd put up just the day before. "You've blocked my shortcut. I've been using this path for months. Do you have any idea how much time I waste going the long way around?" I stared at her, utterly baffled. My driveway. My property. And yet here she was, screaming at me as if I'd keyed her car instead of the other way around. My hands balled into fists as I took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to keep my composure. "Linda," I said evenly, "this is my driveway, not a public street. You don't have the right to cut through here." She scoffed, flicking her hand dismissively as if I were a pesky fly. "That's absurd. The HOA permits it. Everyone knows this is the quickest way out of the neighborhood. Why are you being so difficult?" I fought the urge to laugh at the sheer audacity. "The HOA doesn't own my land, Linda. I do. And I'm tired of you treating my driveway like your personal expressway." Her eyes narrowed, and she leaned in close, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Listen here, newbie, I don't care about your little rules. I've lived here for 15 years. You're just some upstart trying to stir things up. But it won't work. This shortcut's always been here, and it always will be." My fists tightened. This woman was beyond reason. For months, I'd watched her SUV barrel through my property, churning up my gravel path without a second thought. I'd tried everything. Cones she'd shoved aside, a gate she'd flattened, even video evidence sent to the HOA showing her blatant trespassing. But they'd brushed it off with feeble excuses. "Linda's been here forever. We can't just change things now." And now, here she was again, acting as if she had every right to be furious with me for daring to stop her. "I'm calling the HOA," she snapped, yanking out her phone. "They'll handle this." I couldn't help but smirk. "Go right ahead, Linda. Let's see how that pans out for you." Her glare sharpened as she stomped back to her SUV, struggling to back off my lawn, leaving deep, muddy tire tracks in her wake. As she sped off, my blood simmered, hands trembling with frustration. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was a full-on war. The afternoon crawled by, thick with tension. I was still fuming from the morning's clash when my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA. I sighed, bracing myself for what I knew would be another salvo from Linda. Sure enough, as I opened it, my stomach dropped. The HOA wasn't targeting Linda. They were coming after me. "Dear homeowner, we have received multiple complaints regarding unauthorized modifications to community access pathways. The recent installation of a fence on your property has been deemed disruptive to neighborhood traffic patterns. We kindly request its immediate removal to maintain community harmony. Sincerely, HOA." I stared at the screen, fury surging anew. Unauthorized modifications? Community harmony? This was a blatant attack. Linda had run straight to the HOA with her grievances, and they'd predictably taken her side. How could they be so oblivious? My fence was there to stop her illegal trespassing, yet they were playing right into her hands. Without a second thought, I grabbed my coat and stormed out the door, heading straight for the HOA office to set them straight. The moment I stepped inside, I saw her, Linda, lounging smugly in the corner, chatting with the board members like they were lifelong pals. Her triumphant grin sent a chill down my spine. "Ah, Mr. Carter," said HOA President Henry Sullivan, barely glancing up from his papers. "We were just discussing your recent landscaping changes." I crossed my arms, patience wearing thin. "You mean the fence I built to keep Linda off my property?" A few awkward coughs and nervous glances passed among the board members before one piped up. "It's just that Linda's been using that route for years. It's practically a neighborhood tradition." I couldn't believe my ears. "Let me get this straight," I snapped, voice low and sharp. "My property's fair game because of some tradition? She's trespassing, and you're backing her up?" Linda let out a fake chuckle. "Come on, James, it's just a shortcut. You're blowing this out of proportion. My fists clenched as I struggled to stay calm. No, Linda, you've been exploiting my property for too long, and I'm done. Henry cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Technically, Linda does have a long-standing presence in the community. I cut him off. I don't care about her presence. She has no right to drive through my driveway, and I'm not tolerating it anymore. The room went quiet, but I could feel the tension simmering. Linda's smirk faltered, and I knew this fight was far from over. Later that afternoon, just when I thought things couldn't escalate further, my phone buzzed again. Another HOA email, but this one felt different, more personal. Dear homeowner, we have received complaints regarding unauthorized modifications to community access pathways. The recent fence installation on your property has been deemed disruptive to neighborhood traffic patterns. We kindly request its immediate removal to maintain community harmony. Sincerely, HOA. My frustration boiled over. The same group that had ignored Linda's trespassing for months was now attacking my attempt to protect my own space. I grabbed my coat and stormed back to the HOA office. Inside, Linda sat smugly, chatting with Henry and the board, her smile as cold and unyielding as stone. Mr. Carter, Henry said, barely lifting his eyes from his papers, we've been discussing your recent landscaping alterations. I leaned forward, fury barely contained. You mean the fence I put up to stop Linda from trespassing? An awkward silence followed, punctuated by coughs and sidelong glances. One board member spoke up. Well, Linda's been using that path for years. It's sort of a tradition. I shook my head, jaw tight. So my property's public because of a tradition? She's trespassing, and you're all complicit. Linda laughed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, James, it's just a shortcut. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I refuse to let her get to me. You've been abusing my property for too long, Linda. This ends now. The HOA might be on your side, but I'm done playing your game. Henry shuffled his papers nervously. Technically, Linda does have some history here. I cut him off. History doesn't give her the right to invade my space. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke to a fresh wave of frustration. The HOA's email wasn't just a complaint. It was an assault on my right to protect my property. They called my fence disruptive and demanded its removal, all to preserve their so-called community harmony. I slammed my phone down, anger coursing through me. This wasn't just about a driveway. It was about my rights. I wasn't letting this go. I grabbed my jacket and headed back to the HOA office, ready to fight. Inside, Linda was there again, chatting with Henry and the board, her grin radiating victory. Mr. Carter, Henry said, barely looking up. We've been discussing your landscaping alterations. I clenched my jaw. You mean the fence stopping Linda from using my driveway as a shortcut? A pause. Then a board member chimed in. Well, Linda's been using that path for years. It's a tradition. My temper flared. So my property's public because of a tradition? She has no right to drive through my driveway. Linda laughed fakely. It's just a shortcut, James. You're overreacting. I shook my head. No, Linda, you've abused my property long enough. I'm done. Henry shifted uncomfortably. Technically, Linda has some history. I cut him off. That doesn't matter. She has no right, and I'm not backing down. That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, my mind still tangled in the day's events. The fence was staying, and so was my resolve. But I knew the war wasn't won. I gazed at the maze of bushes I'd been planning, a secret weapon. After all Linda had done, I wanted her to feel trapped by her own stubbornness. The maze was my answer, and it would be flawless. The next morning, my landscaper, Tom Riley, arrived with his crew. The work was grueling, but the maze had to be perfect, every path confusing, every turn a dead end. I didn't just want to keep Linda out. I wanted her to feel the frustration she'd forced on me. Tom grinned when I explained my vision. This is the pettiest thing I've ever heard, he said, but I'm all in. As the days passed, the hedges grew thick and dense, a living fortress. I imagined Linda driving in, only to realize she'd walked into my trap. The thought kept me patient. Then it happened. One morning, Linda's SUV rolled up, hesitating as she spotted the maze. My pulse raced as I watched from my window. She pulled in, tires crunching gravel, then stopped, unsure. She reversed, tried again, and hit dead end after dead end. I chuckled. watching her frustration mount. The honking started, angry, desperate, but there was no escape. I designed it to be a nightmare. Soon, she stormed out of her car, face red with rage, and stomped into the maze. Every turn led her nowhere, a rat in a cage. It was poetic. She'd bullied her way onto my land, and now she was trapped by her own arrogance. She grabbed her phone, no doubt calling the HOA or police, but it was useless. This was my property. She'd entered willingly. She screamed in frustration, then finally stumbled out, panting, humiliated. Before she could drive off, I stepped onto the porch. "Lost in my maze, Linda?" I called, satisfaction dripping from my voice. She glared, eyes blazing. "This is harassment." I raised an eyebrow. "Harassment? You trespassed on my property." She was defeated, and she knew it. The police came and went, leaving justice in their wake. Linda, the once mighty HOA tyrant, walked away defeated, her arrogance shattered. Neighbors peeked from their windows, surprised, relieved. Her reign was over, and I'd ended it. Weeks later, the HOA, humiliated, backed off. Linda became a shadow, avoiding me entirely. The peace I'd lost returned, and watching her pristine image crumble was the ultimate victory. She'd lost everything. I'd won, not just for me, but for everyone she'd oppressed. But a strange calm lingered, like the quiet before a storm. One evening, I saw her again, standing by the maze, staring. No anger, just resignation. She stepped inside, not to fight, but to accept her loss. I watched, a smile tugging at my lips. She was trapped in the symbol of my triumph, finally understanding the cost of her actions. A week later, the HOA struck again, demanding the maze's removal with threats of legal action. I fired back. "The maze is my property, legally compliant, and it stays. Pursue action if you must. I'll fight, and I'll win." Peace settled over me. Then, Henry and Linda showed up in person, demanding its removal. I stood firm. My property, my rules. They left, defeated. Days passed quietly, but one evening, Linda returned, studying the maze with cold determination. I approached. "Think you've won, James?" she spat. I smiled. "I don't think, Linda. I know." She faltered, realizing her tactics were useless. The next day, she tried again, but her spirit was broken. The maze became a neighborhood landmark, and Linda faded away, her control gone. The war was over, and I'd won. Peace at last.